I am one of the Autism and Behavior Consultants for Hancock Madison Shelby Educational Services. I'm the consultant for the school this year. Sometimes it switches up, so you may or may not see me every year. But I do not only behavioral consultation and with the kids with autism, but I also do some social skill groups in the building right now. That can't happen every single year because we rotate among schools, but I have a couple in place right now. So what we'll do is we'll get into small groups and practice some of these social skills that the kids have deficits in, hoping that if they're practicing them in my small group, that then they can practice them further once they get out into their classrooms. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about is, what in general is an autism spectrum disorder. And I have a pretty fancy definition up here from the Autism Society, but really it's just a neurological disorder that affects the brain. It shows up typically in the younger years. They're not always diagnosed at that young age, but oftentimes the signs were present at some point in those younger years. It's going to affect 3 different areas oftentimes: communication skills, social skills, and play and leisure activities. So if you have someone diagnosed on the spectrum, oftentimes you're going to see deficits in these areas. Now, if you're talking about Asperger's syndrome, which we'll talk about further in just a minute, it's usually the social skill part that's the biggest area. But if you're talking about something a little bit lower functioning, you're probably going to see all 3. The spectrum, when we refer to the spectrum, we're talking about just all the different levels that we might see with autism. You are just not going to see 2 kids with autism that are the same, look the same, need the same things. So that is really important to remember, and that's why we hope to give you kind of a toolbox and some of the things that are effective, because they are not going to work for everyone. We've probably seen the PDD and OS here. That is typically kids that have some of the characteristics on the spectrum, but not enough to be considered autism. So you might hear that. We've got autism, so you've got kind of the different functioning levels within there, and then the Asperger's syndrome, which is probably actually more of what you guys are going to see out in general education. A lot of the times the students with Asperger's syndrome are in general education. So that's probably what you guys are going to run into a lot of the time. Here are several characteristics of autism. I'm not going to read through all of them, but insistent on routines, maybe display tantrums for no apparent reason. We might see self-injurious behavior, difficulty interacting with others, avoiding eye contact, all of those different things. What I really want to focus on with you guys, though, is this type of stuff. Because, again, in general education, you're probably going to see the social deficits as being your biggest area of concern and area that you can help the kids with. So, inability or lack of desire to interact with peers, lack of understanding of social cues, socially and emotionally inappropriate behaviors, limited or abnormal use of verbal communication. You're probably going to see a lot of this. And I actually gave you guys this handout. It's the second handout from the PowerPoint. And this is just all kinds of different areas in the area of social skills that kids can have deficits in that you might see. Anything from, having a difficult time interacting with peers, lack of understanding of game playing, engaging in unusual behaviors or activities, inappropriate responses. Maybe when something is sad, they're laughing. Maybe when it's a serious time, they're telling jokes in class, trying to get responses from people. So because of this deficit area, you're going to see these inappropriate actions taking place probably on a pretty regular basis. And I think the reason why I wanted to give you this handout is so that you can scan it sometimes when you do have children on the spectrum in your classrooms. Because I think a lot of times they do just present like they're being difficult during certain times, or they're wanting the attention in the classroom, or they're trying to be somewhat disruptive, but really oftentimes they fall in these categories, which is a deficit area. This is a skill that was never developed, that was never built, that still has to be taught. So it's kind of our jobs, I think, when we see that kind of stuff, to try and teach it right on the spot if we can. There's nothing wrong with having certain consequences in place if students are, pushing one another, if they are being inappropriate in their language and different things like that. But if it's disability related, the best thing that we can do is teach the replacement behavior. Because we can give consequences all day long, but the fact is if the skill's not built, if they don't know a better response, they're never going to give a better response. So I think the best thing that we can do in those situations is continue to try and build that skill. So we might have a situation where we're asking somebody to do something and their response is to fall to the floor. We have to encourage them, Had that happen today. We have to encourage them to get through that situation with whatever strategies we can. Life isn't so bad when you do do your work, you know? I think the more we pay attention to some of the negative things and less attention to how to make those skills better and build those skills and teach those social skills, the better off we're. It's kind of just like teaching academics, you know? I mean, a lot of times, especially the kids with Asperger's, they're pretty high academically. It's the social part that's kind of our job to help them through, because we do have them 6 and 7 hours a day. So I think it's really helpful if we know what some of their areas of difficulty are, so we can work through it when they come up. So here's what we can do in some of the classrooms that I think have been really helpful if you have, you know, situations where kids are just not doing really, really well. A lot of times kids with autism are visual learners, so having any type of visual strategy in place is going to be really helpful. We have a particular kindergartner who uses a picture schedule that looks like this. We actually took real live pictures of the classroom. You don't necessarily always have to do that. You could use clip art or, you know, Google Images or whatever. In this particular case, we thought it would be better if we actually used the classroom pictures. So we took pictures of the classroom and we line it out for him each morning. This is what's going to be expected of you. And when you know what's expected of you in a day, typically your behavior is a little bit better. Same goes for us. You know, we know what our calendar's like. If you walk into the door in the morning and you do the same thing every day, and then somebody says, by the way, you're going to be subbing for a classroom, you're not going to fall apart because we're adults and we can cope. But it definitely changes your mindset where you're like, oh man, you know, I had plans for today. I thought I knew what I was doing. Same goes for these little guys a lot of the time. So we have this in place for him so he knows what to expect. We only have a couple pictures present typically, and then we reload it later on so he doesn't see 10 or 12 at one time. Yeah, older kids might be able to handle seeing 10 or 12 at one time. This particular student can. That might send him over the edge. We have some visual rewards in place for him and stuff too. So we say, you know, this is the kinds of things that you're working for. Why don't you pick something? And that's how we reward him. So we try to have any kind of visual we can in place for the younger kids, especially if they're struggling to get through the daily routine. If they're not, you don't have to, but a lot of times they do. For, you know, kids who maybe are higher functioning or are older, and maybe you just see them struggling in certain parts of the day, a checklist just like this could be really, really handy. It could be words and pictures. So, you know, they're doing really well all day except for the morning routine's a complete disaster. So you could put something on your desk, here's a little checklist, check it off when you're done, bring it to my desk, you get a sticker, a smile, a high five, a Skittle. I mean, I don't know, it doesn't have to be, but you know, I think this can also be helpful in some of the specials. If, you know, the thing about autism and specials is that you're not doing the same thing every day. So every day is a brand new ball game. I don't know what's going to be expected of me. I know it's probably going to be the same teacher, but I don't know exactly what we're going to be doing. So sometimes this might be helpful too if you see kids struggling through your specials classes. It might say, you know, write your name, do a craft, then we're going to be all done. I don't know. You know, or we're going to play a game, do a little exercise, run 2 laps, then we're going to be done. And it might help a little bit of them getting through, you know, this activity isn't going to last forever. Here is what's expected of you. And you might not have to do it. It's just sort of an idea for some of those maybe small times in the day. If you see difficulties occurring, it might be helpful to just help them know what to expect. Some of the other visuals that you can do is a lot of times if you're talking about a page number, sometimes you could just write it on the board at the same time. That way if they didn't hear you, they're seeing it. Maybe if you notice a particular kid with attention difficulties and you're giving a lecture, you could take your lecture notes and put it in front of them, have them highlight, something like that. That might be really helpful. Sometimes that transfer information is kind of difficult. So, you know, I'm all the way up here and they're trying to process what I'm saying, or read it off the board and transfer it to a paper, highlighting or anything like that to shorten the assignment, but they're still getting what you need them to get could be really helpful. We use timers a lot of the time too, especially with difficult tasks. Visual timers, auditory timers, it lets them know the activity that they dislike is not going to last forever. And organization, oh my heavens. You know, a lot of times the kids with higher functioning autism, this is probably going to be an area that you're really going to see difficulty with. And I think that, you know, I can't express enough how we should start at the younger years to work on this, because even if we do, it's still probably going to be a lifelong struggle. Doesn't mean that they can't get the hang of it, but it's still going to be something that's going to be work. So as early as you can, letting them know where things belong. If you have to color code for subjects, do that. If you have to, we've actually had kids, and this sounds a little bit crazy sometimes, but we've actually had kids that have 2 desks sit next to each other, so one is theirs and one is an empty desk, and it helps them keep their materials a little bit more organized and gives them a little bit more room.
We don't have room.
No, you probably don't, but we've done it before. We have set up reward systems for them, so maybe you would check it weekly and say, if you have these things in the folders that they're supposed to be in, I'm going to give you a little treat or a sticker or a reward to show to mom or something like that. That might be really helpful. Because this is going to be a problem area a lot of the times. There's something about organization in the brain of children with autism, and many other children for that matter, don't get me wrong, that sometimes is very, very difficult. So they may have, all the work done and be able to produce the work on tests and all this kind of stuff, but homework's not making it in because it's here, there, and everywhere. So do whatever you can to help build this skill, any one of you if you see it. So get creative in any way that you possibly can, even if they have to have, something that looks completely different than everyone else, because if all the other kids have 3 binders and they only have to have 1 to keep everything together, that's really okay. If you're using a general assignment notebook for the whole school, but they cannot seem to get it together with this assignment notebook, there's nothing wrong with creating something on Microsoft Word and printing it off for them every day and making it a checklist or something that they can use. Just nothing wrong with it at all. So, give clear, concise instructions as much as possible. Really, you just need to give them the information that they need to know. This is really kind of important if there's a reprimand or a correcting of behavior too, is give them the information they need to know and be quiet after that point. Anything after that point, any major explaining is going to go in one ear and out the other. And allow time for processing. So if you're asking something of them, a lot of times kids with autism have a processing delay. So give them a few minutes to respond. Don't assume that they're being disrespectful if they don't respond to you right the second that you might expect. Be willing to give instructions to the group and then to that child to make sure that they understand. This might happen a little bit more in the younger years when they're trying to figure out who you're talking to. I have seen kids in kindergarten and first grade classrooms, the teacher will give a group instruction, and they're just standing there. They have no idea the teacher's talking to them because nobody said their name, nobody walked right up and got right in their face and said, you need to do it too. They don't understand that. So in those beginning years, you might have to be willing to do things like that. Say to the group and go, it's you too. You might have to actually walk over and say their name or remind them that they're part of that group. I think when they get older, they catch on. But in the younger years, I think sometimes you'll see that. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but help them through the social situations as much as possible. That's going to be their main deficit area, especially the higher functioning kids. Model the appropriate behavior, teach an alternative behavior, anything that's more appropriate than pushing, hitting, whatever it is that they're exhibiting. And also, at some point, it might be important for the peers to understand. And we're willing to give peer training. So if you get to a point where students are older and you go, you know what, the differences are really starting to be really noticeable. And we want people to understand what's going on here. We have some different things that we can do to come in and talk to the class about autism, Asperger's, or just a general disability and what different kids need to be successful. We don't even have to bring up specific names if we don't want to, specific disability titles, but we can talk about those types of things if it gets to the point where you're getting a lot of questions, where there just seems to be some misunderstanding. So you can call on us for that. Group work, this is going to be a really hard thing to do in general education because it really does involve all of the social skills that I talked about that they have deficits in. So one of the things that I think is important to do if you're working on some type of group tasks and you see that the student's having a difficult time is be really specific about what you need them to do. So if you send them off into a group and you have a list of roles and you say, I want you guys to choose who gets what, you might actually pre-think about what the student would be good at, what their interests are, what they might like, and assign them the role. It might be something that you can do. Just so that it's a situation that's kind of positive from the beginning. So if they really, really like to write, which they probably don't, but if they really, really, bad example, if they really, really love to handwrite, then you might say, you're going to be the recorder, and everyone else is going to kind of figure out what they're going to do. It might just give them a positive feeling about the group work, because group work's kind of